Hello and welcome back to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm so glad you're here. Wherever you're listening from, whether it's a cozy bed in the countryside, a couch in the city, or perhaps under the stars somewhere in between, I'd love to know where you are and what time it is right now. Feel free to share it in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how this little channel floats across time zones like a drifting thought. Before we begin, if you enjoy these gentle deep dives into science and the strange wonders of the world, I'd be truly grateful if you gave the video a like or even subscribed. It helps keep the lights on and the neurons firing, albeit very, very slowly. Tonight we're going to explore something that, quite literally, shapes the way we see everything: human sight. From the biology behind our eyeballs to the curious tricks our brains play with the images they receive, sight is more than just a sense. It's a conversation between light and consciousness. Now, I do hope this video helps you unwind and maybe even drift off to sleep. But fair warning, if you find yourself staying awake because it's too interesting, well, at least you'll wake up a bit smarter. One gentle reminder before we dive in: this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It's not intended to diagnose, treat, or offer medical advice. If you have concerns about your eyes or your vision, please speak with a qualified medical professional. So take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, maybe dim the lights, and let's gently wander through the world of vision. It all began with a blob. Not the most glamorous start, perhaps, but somewhere in the vastness of prehistoric oceans, a single-celled organism twitched in response to light. That twitch was no grand gesture, no thunderous event, but it was the spark of something profound. That tiny, flickering response marked the beginning of vision as we know it. Billions of years ago, when life was still just learning to wriggle. Back then, light meant survival. If you could detect where the light was, you could guess where the sun was. And if you could guess where the sun was, you could probably guess where the surface was. And if you knew where the surface was, you were less likely to be eaten by something large and toothy. Evolution, as always, had an opinion on such matters. Those primitive light-sensitive cells didn't see shapes, colours, or dancing shadows. They just noticed brightness. But even that was an advantage. From there, nature, the great and slightly chaotic engineer, began experimenting. Over millions of years, no rush, nature always takes her time, light-sensitive patches turned into dimples. Dimples turned into cups. Cups eventually evolved into enclosed chambers with a small opening, like a pinhole camera. The image wasn't very sharp, but it was better than nothing. It was like trying to watch television by staring at a potato. Vague, but enough to get the gist. Eventually, some clever invertebrate ancestors developed something even more exciting: a transparent covering over that opening, which evolved into a lens, and once you have a lens, you can focus light. Suddenly, instead of just noticing brightness or vague shapes, creatures could see detail. They could tell the difference between a rock and a crab, and that meant dinner, or being dinner, depending on the direction of travel. This leap in visual complexity happened during a rather chaotic time in Earth's history known as the Cambrian explosion. Roughly 540 million years ago, life was going through a bit of a wild phase. Creatures were evolving new body plans, strange limbs, wild defenses, and, you guessed it, better vision. Why the visual arms race? Well, once some creatures began to see, others had to respond. If you were suddenly visible to a predator with good eyesight, you either had to get better at hiding, better at running, or better at watching them right back. Predators grew sharper eyes to spot prey, and prey evolved camouflage, trickery, and sometimes even better vision themselves. It was a biological game of chess, except nobody knew the rules, and everyone had claws. To get a sense of how dramatic this evolutionary leap was, imagine life before vision like playing tag in complete darkness. Then suddenly someone turns on a flashlight. The rules change. Those who adapt survive. Those who don't, well, they become fossils. And it wasn't just one type of eye that evolved. No, evolution, with all the subtlety of a child given access to glitter glue and a toolbox, tried out lots of different designs. There are compound eyes, like those found in insects, made up of thousands of little lenses called ommatidia. Each lens captures a tiny piece of the world, and together they form a mosaic image. Great for detecting movement, less great for watching Netflix. Then there are camera-type eyes, like ours, which use a single lens to focus light onto a retina. This design evolved independently in several lineages, including cephalopods like octopuses and squids. That's right. Octopuses don't just have clever brains and impressive camouflage, they also have incredible eyes. In fact, their eyes are in many ways better than ours. Unlike human eyes, which have a blind spot due to the way our optic nerve plugs in from the front, octopuses have no such flaw. Their optic nerves connect from behind, meaning no blind spot. Evolution gave them the deluxe model, and we got the beta version. But don't feel too bad, our eyes are still an extraordinary achievement. Packed into each retina are over 120 million rods and 6 million cones. That's 120 million tiny photoreceptors dedicated to detecting light, shadow and movement, plus 6 million more for colour and detail. It's like having a miniature army in each eyeball, working around the clock to keep you from bumping into coffee tables. Now, a fun little detour. Did you know that some creatures can see in wavelengths we can't even imagine? Bees, for example, can see ultraviolet light. To them, flowers don't just look colourful, they practically glow with secret messages written in nectar. Snakes like pit vipers can detect infrared, allowing them to see the heat radiating from prey. And the mantis shrimp, the legendary mantis shrimp, can see polarised light and has up to 16 different types of photoreceptors, compared to our humble 3. It might just be the closest thing to a Technicolor superhero under the sea. In contrast, humans evolved to favour a different strategy: clarity over range. We don't see ultraviolet or infrared, but we do have remarkably good colour vision compared to most mammals. That's because our ancestors were tree dwellers who needed to tell ripe fruit from unripe ones. Being able to spot a juicy red berry hidden among the green leaves could mean the difference between a full belly and a very hungry evening. Evolution tends to reward snack-seeking behaviour. Of course, eyes didn't evolve in a vacuum. As vision improved, so did the need for more brain power to interpret what those eyes were seeing. After all, what good is a crisp image if you can't make sense of it? So along with better eyes came bigger brains, particularly the parts responsible for processing visual information. In humans, that's a good chunk of the brain. Nearly 1/3 of the cortex is involved in vision in some way. You could say your brain is basically a glorified image processor with legs. So, from humble light-sensitive blobs to the dazzling colour-perceiving eyeballs, reading or hearing this sentence right now, vision has had a long and twisty journey. And what's perhaps most fascinating of all is that this journey has played out countless times in countless ways across the tree of life. Vision didn't evolve just once. It emerged independently over 40 times. It's like nature just really liked the idea and kept coming back to it. There's something comforting in that, isn't there? That life, when given the chance, so often chooses to open its eyes, not to see the world perfectly, but to glimpse it just enough to survive, to explore, to chase the light. So the next time you blink or squint at something in the distance, remember, you're the result of billions of years of biological curiosity. You're a creature that carries the legacy of ancient oceans, of sunlit reefs and shadowy forests. You're one more twist in the great glowing spiral of life that looked at the darkness and decided to watch it closely. And with that you may feel your own eyes growing heavier, which is of course perfectly okay. After all, even the best eyes need rest. Let's take a moment to appreciate the humble eyeball. 2 small squishy spheres, each about the size of a ping-pong ball, gently tucked into the sockets of your skull. They don't look particularly impressive on their own, more like peeled grapes than the jewel-tone marvels of Renaissance portraits, but make no mistake, they are among the most complex organs in the human body. And they've got a lot going on. So, how exactly does an eyeball work? Let's begin at the very front, where light first enters the eye. The first structure it meets is the cornea. This is the clear dome-shaped surface that covers the front of your eye, and it's responsible for bending or refracting incoming light. In fact, the cornea does most of the heavy lifting when it comes to focusing light. Around 2/3 of the eye's total focusing power comes from this transparent curve. After passing through the cornea, light slips into the anterior chamber, a little space filled with a fluid called aqueous humor. It's not there for decoration. It helps maintain eye pressure, nourishes the eye, and keeps things comfortable. Like a soothing bubble bath, but for your vision. Next comes the iris, the coloured part of your eye, the bit that makes people compliment you at parties. Blue, green, brown, hazel. It's all just pigment and muscle. The iris is essentially a donut-shaped muscle that controls the size of the central hole, which is the pupil. In bright light, the pupil shrinks to reduce the amount of light coming in. In the dark, it widens to let in as much light as possible. It's an automatic response, like a camera adjusting its aperture. Then the light moves through the lens, a clear, flexible structure behind the pupil. The lens fine-tunes focus, helping you shift between seeing your book and then, say, a pigeon in the distance that looks suspiciously like it's up to something. The lens changes shape thanks to a ring of muscles called the ciliary body. When those muscles contract or relax, the lens thickens or flattens. This process is known as accommodation. Not to be confused with hotel bookings, as it just means adjusting focus. And from here, light moves through the vitreous humor, the thick, jelly-like substance that fills the largest chamber of the eye. This stuff gives the eye its shape and helps keep everything in place. Fun fact, you're mostly seeing through a substance that's over 99% water. It's like your brain lives in an aquarium and is constantly peering out through two watery portals. Finally, the light reaches the back wall of the eye, the retina. Now this is where the magic happens. The retina is a thin layer of tissue containing photoreceptor cells that detect light and begin turning it into signals your brain can understand. There are two main types of photoreceptors, rods and cones. Think of them as the eye's night crew and day crew. Rods are incredibly sensitive to light. You've got about 120 million of them in each eye. They work best in low-light conditions and are responsible for your night vision. They don't detect colour, but they're excellent at picking up motion and shapes in dim environments. That's why everything looks a bit grayscale at dusk. It's rod time. Cones, on the other hand, are your colour vision experts. You've got about 6 million of them, and they come in 3 varieties, each tuned to a different part of the visible light spectrum: red, green, and blue. The cones are concentrated in the central part of the retina, particularly in a small pit called the fovea, which is where your vision is sharpest. When you look directly at something, your fovea is doing the work, giving you rich detail and colour. It's worth noting that there's a spot on your retina that has no photoreceptors at all, the place where the optic nerve exits the eye. This is your blind spot. You don't usually notice it because your brain is excellent at filling in the gaps, blending the visual fields seamlessly like a very confident magician. Speaking of the optic nerve, this bundle of over 1 million nerve fibres carries all the electrical signals from the retina to your brain, where they'll be interpreted into meaningful images. This is where your visual journey stops being about light and starts being about perception. Let's pause here for a moment to appreciate just how ridiculous this system is, in the best possible way. Your eyes take photons, tiny packets of light energy that have travelled across space and time, bend them, focus them, filter them through biological liquids, convert them into electrochemical signals, and send them to a 3-pound lump of grey matter that then turns them into sunsets, smiles, and traffic signs. Not bad for a pair of wet marbles, but we haven't even touched on all the supporting cast that keeps your eyes working. Take the eyelids, for example. Simple enough, right? But they're not just for blinking flirtatiously or shielding your eyes from bad movies. They act like windshield wipers, spreading tears across your eye's surface to keep it moist and clean. Blinking also helps protect the eye from dust, debris, and surprise pokes. You blink about 15 to 20 times per minute, which adds up to around 28,000 blinks a day. That's a lot of maintenance. And those tears, they're not just salty expressions of your deepest feelings. Tears are composed of water, oils, mucus, and enzymes that lubricate, protect, and disinfect your eyes. There are actually 3 types of tears: basal, the everyday kind; reflex, like when you chop onions; and emotional, the ones that show up during sad movies or heartwarming pet reunions. There are also the extraocular muscles, a team of 6 small but mighty muscles attached to each eye. These muscles control where your eyes point, allowing you to track moving objects, scan a page, or roll your eyes when someone tells you that Pluto isn't a planet anymore. They're incredibly precise. Your eyes can shift focus and direction in a fraction of a second, often moving together in perfect synchrony. And if they don't move in harmony, that's when issues like strabismus or eye misalignment can occur. And let's not forget the sclera, the white part of your eye. It's not just decorative, it provides structure and protection. Interestingly, humans are one of the few animals with visible sclerae. Some researchers think this might help with nonverbal communication, allowing others to see where we're looking. It's like nature gave us built-in social subtitles. So when you look in the mirror and see your reflection staring back, remember, you're looking at the end result of countless evolutionary experiments, and an incredible array of tissues, fluids, and cells working together in microscopic harmony. From the cornea that first bends the light, to the retina that captures it, to the brain that finally makes sense of it all, your eyes are nothing short of a biological symphony. And though they may not always work perfectly, nearsightedness, farsightedness, floaters and all, they are still remarkably efficient little machines. In truth, we often take our eyes for granted. We use them constantly, relentlessly, without a second thought. They are our primary interface with the world, our fastest tool for gathering information, and a major way we connect with others. So as you lie back and let your eyelids grow heavier, it's a small wonder to consider that even as they close, your eyes are still humming with quiet activity. Resting, yes, but always ready for the next flicker of light. Close your eyes for a moment, not too hard, just enough to let the world dim. In that soft darkness, your eyes have technically done their part. The lens focused the light, the retina caught it, the optic nerve carried the message. But what now? How do those messages become sight? Where exactly does seeing happen? The answer, quite surprisingly, is not in your eyes at all. Seeing as we know it happens in your brain. While your eyes are responsible for collecting light and converting it into electrical signals, the real work of turning those signals into a coherent, colourful, moving picture of the world falls to your brain, specifically the visual cortex, which is located at the back of your head in the occipital lobe. So technically, you're seeing things with a part of your brain that would touch your pillow if you were lying flat on your back. It's almost poetic. Let's take a step-by-step journey through this curious internal process. When light enters your eyes and strikes the photoreceptors on the retina, those rods and cones we talked about earlier, it gets converted into electrical impulses. These impulses travel along the optic nerve, which is a thick bundle of more than 1 million nerve fibers. These fibers exit the back of the eye and head towards the brain. But here's where it gets interesting. The optic nerves from both eyes meet at a structure called the optic chiasm, where they partially cross. This crossing is not just for flair, it's incredibly important. Signals from the left half of your visual field from both eyes go to the right hemisphere of your brain, and signals from the right half of your visual field go to the left hemisphere. This crossing ensures that each half of your brain gets a full, composite picture of the world in front of you. It's a bit like a traffic roundabout for photons. From the optic chiasm, the signals travel through the optic tract and reach a relay station deep in the brain called the lateral geniculate nucleus, or LGN for short. This structure is part of the thalamus, which acts like a switchboard operator, deciding where sensory information goes next. The LGN organizes and refines the input and then sends it on to the primary visual cortex, also known as V1, at the very back of the brain, and here, finally, is where you actually begin to see. But even here, the process is far from simple. The visual cortex is not a single, monolithic processor. It's more like a network of specialized regions, each responsible for decoding a different piece of the visual puzzle. Edges, movement, depth, color, and even more abstract things like orientation or facial expressions. Imagine for a moment that your brain is trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle with lightning speed. Except the puzzle is changing constantly. The pieces are blurry, and there's no box cover to reference. Every fraction of a second, your brain assembles thousands of tiny fragments into a coherent scene. A tree blowing in the wind, the flicker of candlelight, the squint of your cat as she judges you silently from across the room. And the amazing thing, your brain doesn't just process what's in front of you, it also guesses. You see, the visual system is not purely passive, it's predictive. Based on past experiences, context, and sensory input from other areas like sound and touch, your brain fills in gaps and makes assumptions about what you're looking at. This is why you can recognize a blurry friend in the distance, or why you sometimes misread a word at first glance. One well-known example of this predictive processing is the blind spot, that small part of your retina where the optic nerve exits, and where no photoreceptors exist. Technically, there's no visual input from this tiny patch of each eye, but do you notice it? Of course not. Your brain simply fills in the missing information based on surrounding patterns. It's the neurological equivalent of fudging an essay answer and hoping no one notices. This predictive function also explains how we're so easily fooled by optical illusions. When your brain receives conflicting or ambiguous visual information, it makes its best guess, and sometimes that guess is wrong. But it's not a flaw, it's a feature. The brain is working to save time and energy, offering you the most likely interpretation, rather than recalculating every single pixel of the visual field over and over. Let's take this a step further. Once the primary visual cortex has processed the raw features of what you're seeing, lines, contrast, colours, it sends this information onto secondary visual areas, such as V2, V3, and so on, where more complex tasks are handled. Some of these areas specialise in recognising shapes and objects. Others process movement and depth. Some are even dedicated to interpreting faces. Your brain has a whole department for faces called the fusiform face area, which is why you're so good at recognising familiar people, and also why certain cartoons with two human eyes can feel slightly unsettling. From there, the brain splits the information into two main pathways: the ventral stream, often called the what pathway, and the dorsal stream, the where pathway. The ventral stream travels to the temporal lobe and is responsible for object recognition. What am I looking at? Is it a banana, a stapler, a sleeping dog, or a crumpled blanket? This stream deals with form, colour, and identity. Meanwhile, the dorsal stream heads toward the parietal lobe, handling spatial awareness and motion. Where is the object? How fast is it moving? Am I about to walk into it? This is your visual GPS and collision avoidance system. The combination of these two pathways gives you a complete visual understanding of your environment. You know what things are and where they are, often without even thinking about it. But here's where things get truly fascinating. Sometimes damage to one part of this system can lead to very specific and bizarre effects. For instance, people with visual agnosia may have perfect vision, but be unable to recognize objects. They can describe shapes and colors, but can't tell you they're looking at a key or a toothbrush. The information is there, the eyes are functioning and the brain is receiving the signals, but the part of the brain that makes sense of it is compromised. Or consider blind sight, a rare condition where individuals with damage to their primary visual cortex report being blind, yet they can still respond to visual stimuli. They can navigate around obstacles, guess the direction of moving objects, even react to facial expressions, all without conscious awareness. It's as if their brain can see, but they can't. This tells us something incredible. Much of what we think of as seeing happens beneath the level of consciousness. Your brain is constantly doing work you're not aware of, filtering, analysing, predicting, before presenting a neatly packaged image to your conscious self. It's like having an internal assistant who goes through all your photos, deletes the blurry ones, applies filters, and presents you only with the good shots. And as much as we like to think of vision as objective, it's deeply tied to perception, attention, and even emotion. Your mood can affect how you interpret what you see. People in a cheerful state tend to perceive ambiguous faces as happier, and vice versa. Stress narrows your visual field, while calmness allows you to take in more. Even memory plays a role. You don't perceive each moment as brand new. Your brain uses memory to stitch together a smooth experience, filling in blanks and smoothing over jumps, kind of like editing a movie to hide the cuts. So when you open your eyes in the morning and take in the room around you, remember, what you're seeing isn't just light bouncing off walls, it's an intricate, ongoing construction project happening at the back of your skull. A private film production, complete with special effects, artistic interpretation, and the occasional continuity error. The beauty of this system is not just in its complexity, but in its elegance. It works almost flawlessly, almost all the time, with almost no conscious effort. And even when you sleep, parts of it keep going, processing dreams, cataloguing memories, subtly shaping your sense of reality. So tonight, as your eyes begin to rest and the world dims again, remember that vision is more than just sight. It's perception, imagination, and memory wrapped together. It's not just how you see the world, it's how you understand it. Imagine for a moment waking up tomorrow with one of your senses missing. Now, which one would you miss the most? If you're like the majority of people, your answer would probably be sight. In survey after survey, people consistently rank vision as the most valued sense, the one they'd least want to lose, and it's not hard to understand why. Our modern world is a visually saturated place. From reading and driving to scrolling through glowing rectangles filled with cat videos and emails, our lives revolve around what we can see. But why exactly do we rely so heavily on sight? Is it just habit, or is there something deeper? something woven into the architecture of our brains and the story of our species. To start with, human beings are visual creatures by design. Roughly 30% of the brain's cortex is involved in processing visual information. That's nearly 1/3 of the available grey matter, all dedicated to decoding light. By comparison, only around 8% is used for touch, and just 2% for hearing. In short, evolution has invested heavily in making sure we're good at seeing things, and it makes sense, literally and figuratively. In the wild, being able to spot danger before it spots you is a massive advantage. Is that just a shadow under the tree, or a very patient tiger? Should I eat that fruit, or is it a slightly deadly berry pretending to be lunch? Sight helps you make decisions from a safe distance, giving you time to react, plan, or, in many cases, run in the opposite direction. But sight isn't just about survival anymore. In modern human life, it's deeply entwined with how we connect to the world around us, and to each other. Take communication, for instance. While we tend to think of language as spoken or written, a large part of how we communicate is actually visual. Facial expressions, hand gestures, posture, eye contact, all of these nonverbal cues help convey tone, intention, and emotion. Your brain is remarkably good at reading faces. So good, in fact, that you can detect the slightest twitch of an eyebrow or curl of a lip and know immediately what someone is feeling. This is thanks to that specialized brain area we mentioned earlier, the fusiform face area, which is dedicated entirely to recognizing faces. We even see faces where there are none, on toast, on clouds, on the front of your car if you look just right. This tendency, called pareidolia, is just your brain being overly enthusiastic about detecting other humans. It's a little like that one friend who's always sure they saw a celebrity, even when it's just someone with a beard and sunglasses. Visual memory also plays a huge role in why we value sight so much. You might forget a name, a date, or where you put your keys, but you'll often remember an image, an old photo, the way sunlight hit the table during breakfast, the pattern on a childhood blanket. We store vast amounts of visual data, and we retrieve it surprisingly quickly. Think about how fast you recognize familiar faces, places, or even brands based on colors and logos. It's like your brain has its own internal Google Images, but without the slow internet. And then there's reading and writing. The invention of written language is one of the most significant developments in human history, and it's entirely visual. Every book, every sign, every menu and map and movie subtitle relies on our ability to recognize symbols with our eyes. When you read these words, your visual system is hard at work turning squiggly shapes into meaning, almost instantly. You probably don't even think about it anymore. But behind the scenes, your eyes are dancing across each line, sending signals to your brain to decode letters, words, and concepts. It's a ballet of neurons and photons, and you're performing it without even noticing. The design of our world also reflects our visual bias. Think about architecture, fashion, art, advertising, cinema. All of these are rooted in aesthetics. We create beauty with our eyes in mind. Colour, shape, symmetry. These things matter because we're visual creatures. We're constantly scanning, comparing and judging based on what we see. Even technology has leaned into this preference. Touchscreens, emojis, memes, GIFs, infographics. The modern internet is built for the eye. The phrase, "a picture is worth 1,000 words," has never felt more accurate. We scroll through images far faster than we read paragraphs. Our attention is captured by motion, colour, contrast. Algorithms are designed to serve us more of what we're already looking at, because they know sight is sticky. Of course, this preference for vision has a few quirky side effects. For example, we often believe that seeing is believing. We trust our eyes, sometimes too much. This is known as visual dominance. When there's a conflict between what we see and what we hear, we tend to believe what we saw. A classic example of this is the McGurk effect, where the sound you hear changes depending on the mouth movements you see. It's a reminder that even perception can be a bit of a group project between your senses, and sometimes sight is the bossiest member of the team. And here's a fun one. Ever wonder why we describe so many non-visual experiences in visual terms? We say things like, "I see what you mean, look at this idea," or "let's shed some light on the subject." Vision is so dominant in our lives that we even use it as a metaphor for understanding. To see is to know. To see clearly is to comprehend. Language itself reflects just how central sight is to our way of being in the world. But it's not just about clarity or information. Sight is emotional. Think of sunsets, paintings, the look on someone's face when they're proud of you. Think of the way light filters through leaves, or the shimmer of stars in a still night sky. These are not just things you observe, they're things you feel. And there's the rub, really. Sight doesn't just tell you what's out there, it changes how you experience it. It colors your memories, shapes your emotions, and steers your attention. It guides your hand when you reach out to a friend. It helps you fall in love with a stranger's smile. It lets you recognize the face of someone you haven't seen in 20 years and still know exactly who they are. So yes, sight is useful, it's practical, but it's also deeply personal. It's part of how we recognize beauty, danger, affection, and even ourselves. Of course, all this reliance on vision doesn't mean the other senses aren't important. Far from it. Try eating your favorite dish while holding your nose. You'll find it loses most of its magic. Or try walking around blindfolded for a day, and you'll discover just how much you depend on hearing, touch, and spatial memory. But for most of us, vision is the anchor. It's the main window through which we watch life unfold, and in that sense it's not surprising that we value it so highly. Sight offers us information, yes, but also art, safety, connection, and joy. It helps us read, drive, work, play, love. It lets us understand the world around us, and perhaps more importantly, it helps us understand our place within it. So as you settle in and let your eyelids grow heavy, know that your eyes, those small round wonders, have served you well today. They've helped you navigate the world, connect with others, and maybe, just maybe, find a little beauty in the ordinary. Now it's their turn to rest. We often think of our five senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste and smell, as a sort of sensory democracy. Each one brings something valuable to the table. But if we're being honest, vision is the loudest guest at that table. It talks the most, takes up the most space, and probably assumes it's sitting at the head. But what happens when we compare vision with its quieter siblings? Is it really the most important sense, or just the flashiest? Let's start with hearing. It might not be as visually spectacular as, well, vision, but it's no less powerful. While your eyes can only face forward, your ears provide you with a full 360-degree awareness of your surroundings. You can hear what's behind you, beside you, and even above or below without ever needing to turn your head. Hearing also works in total darkness. You can't see a whisper, but you can definitely hear one. It alerts you to danger in the dark, helps you recognize emotion in someone's voice, and lets you enjoy the comforting rustle of leaves or the soft rhythm of a lullaby. It's also the only sense that never truly sleeps. Even when you're unconscious, your ears are still taking in sounds, ready to jolt you awake if something feels off. In fact, hearing is often the first sense we develop in the womb and the last one to fade as we die. It's there at the beginning, and it's there at the end. Kind of poetic, isn't it? Then there's touch, a sense that often gets overlooked because it's everywhere all the time. But touch is vital. Without it, we couldn't feel warmth, pain, texture, or pressure. We couldn't enjoy hugs or hold hands or notice when our foot is falling asleep. Touch tells us whether something is smooth or rough, hot or cold, sharp or soft. It's the first sense we experience as newborns, and one of the most emotionally powerful throughout our lives. And then there's smell, the underdog of the sensory world. It doesn't get nearly as much attention, but it quietly shapes our experience in subtle and profound ways. Scents are directly linked to memory and emotion, thanks to the close connection between the olfactory bulb and the brain's limbic system, especially the amygdala and hippocampus. That's why a certain smell, like sunscreen, pine needles, or fresh-baked bread, can instantly transport you to another time and place. You don't even have to try. Your nose has already packed your emotional luggage and sent you off on a nostalgic vacation. Smell also plays a quiet role in attraction. Though we don't often talk about it, humans, like many animals, can be influenced by pheromones, chemical signals we pick up without realizing it. We're sniffing each other all the time, in the most polite and subconscious way possible. And of course, taste, the sense that keeps mealtimes interesting. Closely linked with smell, taste gives us pleasure, warning, and satisfaction. Bitter flavors might signal danger, while sweet tastes often indicate energy-rich food. Evolution taught us to crave and avoid certain tastes for survival. You can thank your ancestors for your love of chocolate and your instinctive grimace at anything suspiciously bitter. But here's the thing. While each sense is remarkable on its own, they rarely work in isolation. The brain doesn't treat them like separate employees with their own desks. It blends them together in a kind of symphony. This process is called sensory integration, and it's how the brain takes all the different streams of data, visual, auditory, tactile, and more, and turns them into one unified experience. When you eat a crunchy apple, for example, you're not just tasting it. You're also seeing its shiny skin, feeling its coolness in your hand, hearing the crisp crunch, and smelling its sweetness. Take away any of those elements, and the experience changes. One particularly fun example of sensory integration is the McGurk effect. If you hear someone say bar, but see the mouth far, your brain may actually perceive far instead of bar. The eyes and ears send conflicting messages, and the brain tries to resolve the conflict by fusing them. This shows just how dominant vision can be. Even when it's wrong, it sometimes overrules the other senses. But let's be fair, vision isn't always the boss. In fact, the dominance of vision can get in the way when it overrides more accurate input from other senses. Imagine watching a movie with a slight audio delay. Your eyes and ears are out of sync and it's uncomfortable, even if the audio is technically correct. That's your brain struggling to reconcile the disagreement. It turns out your brain would rather have an incorrect but cohesive experience than a fragmented one. It's like a friend who would rather guess the end of a story than admit they don't know what happens. Another great example of cross-sensory behavior is synesthesia, a fascinating condition in which stimulation of one sense involuntarily triggers another. People with synesthesia might see sounds as colours or associate certain numbers with specific tastes. To them, the number 5 might taste like mint, or the note C# might glow yellow. While it sounds extraordinary, synesthesia is a reminder of how fluid and interconnected the senses can be. The boundaries between them are not always as solid as we imagine. There's also something called sensory substitution, which occurs when one sense takes over the role of another. This is most commonly seen in people who are blind or visually impaired. The brain, ever adaptable, will often reassign tasks. The part of the brain typically used for vision might start processing touch or sound instead. For example, some blind individuals develop heightened hearing and echolocation abilities. They use clicking sounds to navigate the world, much like bats do. Others might use braille to read, with their sense of touch activating regions of the brain normally reserved for visual input. It's a powerful demonstration of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience. So while vision may be the dominant sense for most of us, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of a team. Each sense contributes something essential, and when one is lost, the others often rise to the occasion. Still, we live in a world designed overwhelmingly for sight. From traffic lights to warning labels, from screens to signs to subtle social glances, we rely on visual cues for nearly everything. In many ways, this has pushed other senses into the background, not because they're less important, but because they're less obvious. We also trust our eyes more than we should. Think of how easily we're fooled by illusions, deepfakes, sleight of hand, or movie magic. We often believe that if we see something, it must be real. But sight is not infallible. It's just another sense, filtered through a brain full of assumptions and expectations. At the same time, when sight is working as intended, it's extraordinary. It's fast, rich in detail, and emotionally resonant. We can recognize faces in milliseconds, detect motion on the periphery of our vision, and appreciate subtle changes in light and shadow. Vision allows us to take in a painting, a landscape, or a glance from someone we love, and feel something profound. But let's not forget, the other senses are not waiting in the wings, quietly sipping tea. They're fully active participants in your experience of the world. Touch lets you feel the breeze. Hearing brings you music and laughter. Smell ties memory to emotion. Taste offers delight and caution. Together they form a complex, nuanced portrait of your life. So perhaps vision is the most valued sense, but not because it's inherently better. Maybe it just got better PR, a little more sparkle, a few more social metaphors, and a starring role in how we design our world. But in the end, it's not about ranking the senses. It's about realizing that your experience is multisensory, rich, and beautifully interwoven. Vision might lead the way, but the others are always close behind, quietly adding depth, meaning and texture to everything you see. And as your eyes begin to rest and the world slowly fades into soft shadow, perhaps the other senses will take over for a while. The warmth of your blanket, the hush of night sounds, the faint scent of the evening air. Sight has had its moment. Now it's someone else's turn. Colour is a curious thing. It feels so real, so undeniable. Red strawberries, blue skies, green grass. And yet, colour isn't something that exists out there in the world, floating around like tiny paint particles waiting to be caught. No, colour is something your brain creates, an illusion so convincing we rarely question it. Let's start at the beginning. Light, as we experience it, is made up of electromagnetic waves. These waves come in all sorts of lengths. Some are long and slow, others short and quick. The tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum that humans can see is known as visible light, and it spans wavelengths from about 400 to 700 nanometers. That's it. Just a narrow slice in a spectrum that stretches from gamma rays to radio waves. When light hits an object, some of that light gets absorbed, and some of it gets reflected. The reflected light bounces into your eyes, passes through the cornea and lens, and lands on the retina at the back. There, the cones, those colour-sensitive photoreceptors, get to work. Humans have 3 types of cones, each tuned to a specific range of wavelengths. We casually call them the red, green and blue cones, though their sensitivity curves overlap quite a bit. When you see a yellow banana, for example, it's not because your eye has a yellow cone. Instead, your red and green cones are activated in a specific ratio, and your brain interprets that pattern as yellow. It's a bit like mixing paint in your mind, except instead of brushes and pigment, you're using neurons and light waves. This system is known as trichromatic colour vision, and it's what allows humans to perceive millions of colours. Not everyone sees them in exactly the same way, though. Some people have colour vision deficiencies, commonly referred to as colour blindness. This usually happens when one of the 3 types of cones is missing or less sensitive than it should be. The most common type is red-green colour blindness, which makes it difficult to distinguish between certain shades of red and green. And no, that doesn't mean people with this condition see the world in black and white. It's more like living in a world with slightly different colour tuning. Like someone adjusted the settings on the TV and threw out the remote. Interestingly, not all animals see the world the way we do. In fact, many see it very differently. Dogs, for example, are often said to be colourblind, but that's a bit of an oversimplification. Dogs have only 2 types of cones compared to our 3. This means they likely see the world in shades of blue and yellow, with a more muted spectrum overall. It's not worse, it's just different. Your dog may not appreciate the colour of your shoes, but they're probably more focused on their smell anyway. Then there are birds. Many species of birds have tetrachromatic vision, meaning they have 4 types of cones. In addition to the red, green and blue that we see, they can also detect ultraviolet light. To them, the world is awash in colours we can't even imagine. Flowers glow with UV patterns, feathers shimmer in secret hues, and ripe berries pop with visual signals invisible to our eyes. What looks ordinary to us may be a neon dream to a bird, and if birds are impressive, let us take a moment to acknowledge the undisputed heavyweight champion of the colour-seeing world, the mantis shrimp. This small, punchy sea creature has up to 16 types of photoreceptors. That's over 5 times more than humans. But here's the twist. Scientists aren't entirely sure the mantis shrimp uses all that visual input in the way we'd expect. Rather than blending colours together like we do, they might process each wavelength separately, almost like a scanner. It's not necessarily about seeing more colours, it might be about reacting quickly to certain ones. The mantis shrimp is a living reminder that evolution often designs for function over flair, even when the result is bizarrely colourful. Back in the human world, our perception of colour can be influenced by more than just wavelengths. Context matters. Consider this. If you put a grey square on a white background, it looks darker than the exact same grey square placed on a black background. Your brain interprets colour and brightness based on contrast, shadows, and surroundings. This is part of why optical illusions can be so baffling. You're not seeing what's there, you're seeing what your brain thinks is there. The most famous recent example of this is, of course, the dress. In 2015, a photo of a seemingly ordinary dress went viral online, sparking furious debate. Some people saw it as white and gold, while others were absolutely convinced it was blue and black. It turns out that people were interpreting the lighting conditions in the photo differently. Some assumed it was in shadow, others assumed it was in bright light, and that changed how their brains adjusted the perceived colours. The moral of the story: your brain is always trying to interpret light in context. It's not just reading wavelengths, it's guessing what those wavelengths mean based on experience, environment, and expectation. This can even extend to language and culture. Different languages divide the colour spectrum in different ways. Some languages have fewer basic colour terms, while others have more. In Russian, for instance, light blue and dark blue are considered entirely separate basic colours. There's no single word for blue in the way English uses it. This linguistic distinction actually affects how speakers perceive shades of blue. They're faster at distinguishing between them than English speakers are. There's also evidence that culture shapes colour preferences. Studies have found that people tend to favour certain colours across many societies. Blue and green often come out on top, while yellow tends to rank lower. But the reasons behind these preferences are still being explored. It could be biology, environment, or simply the result of a lifetime of subtle reinforcement. Maybe people just like the colours of the sky and trees. Maybe yellow is unfairly associated with warning signs and spoiled food. Sorry, lemons. And then there's the emotional power of colour. Artists and designers have long understood that colour affects mood and perception. Warm colours like red and orange can feel energetic or passionate. Cool colours like blue and green are calming or serene. That's why spas often use soft blues, and fast food restaurants tend to go heavy on the red and yellow. Whether we're aware of it or not, colour influences how we feel. Colour is also tied deeply to memory and personal experience. The colour of your childhood bedroom, the clothes someone wore on a significant day, the exact shade of the sky before a summer storm. These colours stick with us, not just as visual impressions, but as emotional bookmarks. And yet, despite how important colour is, we rarely stop to think about how strange it really is. It's not a physical property, it's a perception. Your brain receives electrical signals from the eyes and turns them into an experience that feels utterly real. There is no actual green out in the universe. There are only light waves around 530 nanometers long. But your brain sees those waves, interprets them based on the firing of certain cones, and gives you green. And that's the miracle. That's the magic trick your brain performs every moment of every day. Colour is, in the end, your brain's interpretation of sunlight bouncing off matter. So the next time you look at a rainbow, or admire a painting, or pick out a new shirt and decide it brings out your eyes, remember, you're experiencing a shared illusion, one that lives entirely in your mind and yet feels completely real. And as the lights dim and your eyes begin to rest, let the colours of the day soften into dream. There are still hues waiting for you behind closed lids, memories of places, of faces, of glowing skies. Colour doesn't disappear in the dark, it just waits quietly for the light to return. Have you ever stared at an optical illusion and felt like your brain was playing a prank on you? Perhaps you've seen lines that look crooked but are actually straight, or images that seem to move even though they're completely still. It's a strange and almost magical experience, one that reminds us that what we see isn't always what's really there. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of visual mischief, where your brain, despite its brilliance, occasionally gets it hilariously wrong. Let's begin with something simple: straight lines. One of the most famous visual illusions is the Müller-Lyer illusion. Picture two lines of equal length. One line has little arrow tails pointing outward, and the other has the same tails pointing inward, like arrowheads. Even though the lines are exactly the same length, the one with the outward tails looks longer. Your brain interprets the shapes around the lines as depth cues, and it makes an assumption about which one is farther away, even though both are on a flat surface. It's as if your visual system can't help but add a third dimension, even when you didn't ask for one. That's a key idea behind many visual illusions. Your brain is trying to make sense of incomplete or ambiguous information. It uses shortcuts, guesses, and experience to fill in the gaps. Most of the time, this works beautifully. But sometimes, it results in what can only be described as visual nonsense. Take the Canisa triangle, for example. It's a classic illusion where three Pac-Man-like shapes are arranged in such a way that your brain sees a white triangle that isn't actually there. There are no lines, no edges, just the suggestion of a triangle. Yet your brain confidently fills in the shape and treats it as real. You might even perceive the non-existent triangle as brighter than the background, despite the fact that nothing has changed. That's because your brain is less interested in raw data than it is in meaning. It wants to recognize objects, patterns, and relationships. It wants to create a world that makes sense, even if it has to invent a few triangles along the way. This leads us into the fascinating realm of visual completion, the brain's habit of filling in missing information. We do this constantly. When someone stands in front of a tree, we don't think the tree is broken in half. Our brain just assumes it continues behind the person. We don't consciously piece it together. It happens automatically. Even your blind spot, the place on your retina where the optic nerve exits and there are no photoreceptors, isn't something you notice. Your brain fills in the blank based on surrounding information. You don't walk around seeing little holes in your vision because your brain is quietly patching things up in real time. It's a master editor, smoothing the seams so you never notice them. But sometimes the brain's editing gets a little too enthusiastic. Consider the motion after effect, also known as the waterfall illusion. If you stare at a moving image, like flowing water or scrolling text, for about 30 seconds and then look at a still object, that object appears to move in the opposite direction. What's happening here is that the motion-detecting neurons in your brain get tired. They've been firing like mad to track the motion, and when the motion stops, the less fatigued neurons in the opposite direction temporarily take over, creating the illusion of movement. It's like your brain is saying, "We've been going left for so long, surely we must be moving right now." There's also illusory motion, where static images appear to move due to clever use of colour and contrast. Certain patterns, especially those with repetitive high-contrast elements, can create the sensation of swirling or pulsing. It's not your eyes doing it. It's the way your brain interprets the conflicting information. Some of these illusions are so convincing they can make you feel dizzy, despite the fact that absolutely nothing is moving. One of the most curious things about these illusions is how universal they are. People all over the world, regardless of culture or language, are tricked in the same way. This suggests that many of the shortcuts and assumptions your brain uses to process visual information are deeply hardwired. Evolution has sculpted your perception to favour speed and efficiency over absolute accuracy. In a world where reacting quickly to movement might save your life, a few visual errors are a small price to pay. Still, illusions aren't just scientific curiosities, they have practical applications too. Artists and designers have long used visual tricks to guide attention and create emotion. Think of the way perspective works in paintings. A few cleverly placed lines and vanishing points can make a flat canvas feel three-dimensional. Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci mastered these techniques, crafting entire worlds that seem to stretch into the distance. Architects use similar tricks to alter the perception of space. Columns that taper slightly toward the top look more balanced. Walls that angle inward make a building seem taller. Even in your living room, choosing a certain colour or lighting can make a space feel larger or cozier. Your eyes are constantly being guided, nudged, and sometimes gently fooled. And then there's the theatre of magic. Magicians have made a career out of exploiting visual perception. Sleight of hand depends on misdirection, guiding your attention to one place while the real trick happens elsewhere. Your eyes can only focus on a small area at a time, and your brain relies heavily on context to fill in the rest. A magician's entire craft is built on knowing how you see, and, more importantly, how you don't see. Interestingly, some visual illusions aren't even visual in the traditional sense. Take phantom limb syndrome, experienced by some people who have lost a limb. They can still feel the missing limb, sometimes even see it in their mind's eye. In certain cases, mirror therapy is used to help, placing a mirror to reflect the existing limb so that the brain perceives two arms or legs. This visual feedback can actually relieve pain or help retrain the brain. It's a stunning example of how powerful sight can be, not just in interpreting the world, but in shaping our internal reality. The mind's tendency to fill in and invent also plays a role in pareidolia, our tendency to see meaningful patterns where there are none. This is most famously seen in faces: the man in the moon, a face in the clouds, or a surprised expression in your morning toast. The brain is so attuned to detecting faces that it sometimes sees them in places they absolutely shouldn't be. It's not a flaw, it's your brain being hypervigilant. After all, in evolutionary terms, it's better to mistakenly think a bush is a crouching predator than to ignore the real thing. Your brain's ability to hallucinate faces, complete shapes, and fabricate motion isn't just entertaining. It's a reminder that perception is an active process. You're not simply observing the world like a passive camera. You're interpreting, editing, and sometimes inventing parts of it. And that's not limited to optical illusions. We do this in dreams, in memories, even in imagination. The same visual machinery that lets you read a book or recognize a friend also lets you picture an entirely fictional landscape or visualize the taste of your favorite dessert. The boundary between reality and perception is surprisingly thin. You don't just see the world, you construct it. The light enters your eyes, yes, but what happens after that is a complex dance of signals, guesses, and subconscious editing. So next time you're fooled by a visual trick or find yourself seeing a face in the bathroom tiles, don't be too hard on your brain. It's doing its best. It's just trying to help you make sense of a chaotic, noisy world using the tools it has. And if those tools sometimes throw in a triangle that isn't really there, well, at least it keeps things interesting. Now, as your eyelids begin to flutter and the world around you softens, perhaps you'll carry with you a little of that visual curiosity. Maybe the shadows in your room will seem just a bit more playful. Maybe the patterns on the ceiling will hint at hidden faces. And if your dreams are filled with impossible shapes and shifting colours, remember, they're just more illusions, spun not by artists or magicians, but by your own remarkable mind. Imagine for a moment a vivid memory. Perhaps it's the face of a loved one, or the image of a beach you once walked along, the way the waves curled toward the sand, the sunlight glittering on the water, the faint outline of distant hills. You can see it, can't you? Not with your eyes, but with something else, a kind of mental vision, an inner cinema. That remarkable ability to see things that aren't actually in front of us is one of the most mysterious and enchanting features of human consciousness. We call it mental imagery, and it allows us to recall, imagine, and even invent scenes inside our own minds. It's like having a private projector tucked away in your skull, no ticket required. What's even more astonishing is that when you picture something in your mind's eye, your brain activates many of the same areas it would if you were seeing the real thing. Studies using functional MRI scans have shown that visualizing an object and actually looking at it both light up the visual cortex, especially in early areas like V1 and V2. It's not quite as strong as real sight, but it's unmistakably similar. Your brain doesn't always draw a sharp line between what's seen and what's imagined. This shared neural activity is part of what makes dreaming so compelling and so strange. When you fall asleep and drift into REM sleep, your brain enters a highly active state. Despite your body being mostly paralyzed to prevent you from acting out your dreams, thankfully, your mind is anything but still. It crafts entire visual worlds from nothing. People, places, symbols, and surreal scenarios unfold behind your closed eyelids. The visual richness of dreams varies from person to person, but for many, dreams are as vivid as real life, sometimes more so. And just like in waking life, your brain is doing all the directing and editing. It generates the lighting, the scenery, the cast, and the plot, usually with very little input from you. Dreams remind us that the brain doesn't need external light to see. It can create light, shadows, landscapes, and even faces entirely from within. And here's an odd twist. Not everyone experiences mental imagery in the same way. Some people have aphantasia, a condition where they are unable to visualize mental images. Ask them to picture an apple, and they know what an apple is. They understand the concept, but they cannot see it in their mind. It's not a lack of imagination or intelligence. It's simply a different wiring of the brain. People with aphantasia often compensate with other sensory strategies. They may think in words, concepts, or physical sensations. And many don't even realize their experience is unusual until someone asks them to imagine a beach or a sunset and they respond with, "Wait, you see it." On the opposite end of the spectrum, some people have exceptionally vivid mental imagery. For them, imagining an object is almost indistinguishable from seeing it with their eyes. They can summon scenes, colours, and even textures with ease. This ability is often linked with high levels of creativity, especially in visual artists, architects, and writers. But again, there's no right or wrong way to imagine. The human mind is gloriously diverse. Memory plays a huge role in visual imagination. When you remember a childhood home or the face of a teacher, your brain retrieves and reassembles fragments of past experiences. These aren't stored like photographs. They're more like pieces of a puzzle scattered across different brain regions. The visual cortex, the hippocampus, which is essential for memory, and even parts of the frontal lobe all work together to reconstruct the image. This process isn't perfect, of course. Memories fade, shift, and sometimes merge. What you see in your mind might not be a completely accurate representation, but it often feels real enough, and in many cases that's more important than precision. Your mental images are deeply personal, emotionally charged, and shaped by experience. Interestingly, visual memory can be trained. People who compete in memory championships often use a technique known as the method of loci, or memory palace. This ancient strategy involves visualizing a familiar place, like a house or a street, and placing imagined objects or pieces of information at specific locations within it. Later, by mentally walking through that place, they can recall the items with remarkable accuracy. This technique leverages the brain's strong spatial and visual memory systems, turning abstract data into concrete scenes. Visualization isn't just for memory, though. Athletes use it too. Mental rehearsal is a well-documented practice in sports psychology. An Olympic skier might visualize every twist and turn of the course before the race. A tennis player might imagine the perfect serve. These mental simulations activate many of the same brain areas involved in actual performance, reinforcing muscle memory and confidence. It's like training without moving a muscle. The same principle applies in music, art, even public speaking. Imagining yourself performing a task successfully can improve real-life performance. It's a kind of neurological rehearsal. The more vividly you can see it, the more effectively your brain can prepare for it. But not all mental imagery is helpful. Some people experience intrusive visual thoughts, unwanted, distressing images that pop into their mind uninvited. These can be a symptom of conditions like PTSD or OCD, and they serve as a reminder that the mind's eye, while powerful, is not always under our control. Then there are hallucinations, perceptions of things that aren't there at all. Unlike mental imagery, which is typically voluntary and recognized as imaginary, hallucinations feel real. They can be visual, auditory, or even tactile. In certain neurological conditions, like Charles Bonner syndrome, people with vision loss may begin to experience vivid, detailed visual hallucinations. Their brains, starved of real visual input, begin generating their own. These aren't necessarily scary. Some people report seeing patterns, landscapes, or faces, but they highlight just how much of vision is created internally. Even in everyday life, we experience moments when the boundary between real and imagined becomes a little blurry. Déjà vu, for example, may occur when your brain falsely recognizes a situation as familiar, possibly due to a misfiring of the memory system. Suddenly, the present feels like a memory. It's unsettling and fascinating all at once. And then there's creativity, the ability to invent what you've never seen. Artists conjure imaginary places, creatures, or emotions and give them form. Writers describe characters and settings that only exist in their minds. Designers sketch products that have never been built. All of this relies on the visual imagination, the ability to see something that isn't there yet. So much of human achievement depends on this internal vision. From cave paintings to spacecraft, we've always imagined things before making them real. Vision, in this sense, is not just about seeing the world as it is. It's about seeing what it could be, and perhaps that's one of the most beautiful things about the visual system. Not just its clarity or complexity, but its capacity for wonder. It doesn't stop working when the eyes close. It keeps going, lighting up dreams, memories, and visions of the future. So tonight, as you lie back and let your eyes rest, know that the show isn't over. Behind those eyelids, your mind may still be painting, revisiting old places, creating new ones, or spinning dreams made of light and shadow. Your eyes may be still, but your imagination is very much awake. Our eyes are among the most intricate and hard-working organs we have. From the moment you wake to the moment you fall asleep, and even sometimes in your dreams, they're constantly collecting, focusing, adjusting, and interpreting light. But like any finely tuned machine, eyes are also vulnerable, and when things go wrong, it can change the way you experience the entire world. Let's start with something that many people encounter: refractive errors. These are the most common eye problems and include conditions like myopia, hyperopia, and astigmatism. Myopia, or nearsightedness, means you can see things clearly up close, but struggle to focus on objects far away. It happens when the eye is too long or the cornea is too curved, causing light to focus in front of the retina instead of directly on it. Hyperopia, or farsightedness, is essentially the opposite. Distant objects are clearer, but close-up vision becomes difficult. This occurs when the eye is too short, or the cornea doesn't bend light enough, resulting in light focusing behind the retina. Astigmatism is a bit of an oddball. It's caused by an irregularly shaped cornea or lens, more rugby ball than football, which scatters light in multiple directions, leading to blurred or distorted vision at all distances. It's a bit like trying to read a book through a glass of water. All of these conditions are usually corrected with glasses, contact lenses, or in many cases refractive surgery such as LASIK. These treatments essentially adjust the way light enters your eyes so that it lands properly on the retina, giving you a clearer picture. But some vision problems are more serious, especially those that involve the structures deeper within the eye. Take cataracts, for example. This condition occurs when the lens of the eye, normally clear, becomes cloudy. Imagine trying to look through a fogged-up window. That's what someone with cataracts might experience. Cataracts usually develop slowly over time, often as a result of aging, although they can also be caused by injury, certain medications, or other medical conditions like diabetes. Fortunately, cataract surgery is one of the most common and successful procedures in modern medicine. The cloudy lens is removed and replaced with a clear artificial one, often restoring vision almost immediately. Then there's glaucoma, a group of eye conditions that damage the optic nerve, usually due to increased pressure inside the eye. Glaucoma is often called the silent thief of sight, because it progresses gradually and often without noticeable symptoms until significant vision loss has occurred. The pressure builds up when the fluid in the eye, called aqueous humor, doesn't drain properly. Over time, this pressure can damage the optic nerve, which is crucial for sending visual information to the brain. If left untreated, glaucoma can lead to permanent blindness. That's why regular eye exams are so important, especially as we age. Early detection can preserve vision, often with medications or surgery to manage the pressure. Another major concern is macular degeneration, particularly age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. The macula is a tiny part of the retina responsible for central vision, the vision you use when reading, driving, or recognizing faces. In AMD, the macula gradually deteriorates, leading to blurred or blank spots in the center of your visual field. There are two main types, dry and wet. Dry AMD is more common and progresses slowly, while wet AMD involves the growth of abnormal blood vessels under the retina and can cause rapid vision loss. Although there's currently no cure, certain treatments such as medications or lifestyle changes can slow the progression. High-dose vitamins, a healthy diet rich in leafy greens, and avoiding smoking have all been shown to support eye health. Another lesser-known but serious condition is retinitis pigmentosa, a genetic disorder that affects the retina and leads to the gradual loss of peripheral vision and night vision. Over time, it can result in tunnel vision and, in some cases, total blindness. Because it's inherited, genetic counselling and early diagnosis are important, especially for families with a history of the condition. But not all vision loss is due to physical damage to the eye itself. Sometimes, the issue lies in how the brain processes visual information. Cortical visual impairment, or CVI, is a neurological condition where the eyes are healthy, but the brain struggles to interpret what they see. This can occur due to injury, stroke, or developmental issues affecting the visual parts of the brain. People with CVI may have perfectly functioning eyes, but they may not be able to make sense of what they're looking at. Then there are more acute, sometimes sudden changes to vision, flashes, floaters, or partial loss. One common culprit is retinal detachment, where the retina peels away from the back of the eye. It's a medical emergency. Without swift treatment, permanent vision loss can occur. Warning signs might include sudden flashes of light, a shower of floaters, or a dark curtain coming over part of your vision. If that ever happens, it's not the time for a nap. It's time for an eye doctor immediately. Even the seemingly harmless floaters, those tiny specks or threads that drift across your field of vision, are worth understanding. They're usually caused by clumps of collagen in the vitreous humor, the gel-like substance that fills the eye. Floaters are common and often harmless, especially with age, but a sudden increase in floaters or the appearance of flashing lights can signal something more serious, like a tear in the retina. And while we're on the topic of things going wrong, let's talk about blindness. It's a word that covers a wide range of experiences. Some people have no light perception at all, complete blindness, while others have functional vision that's limited in specific ways. Blindness can be congenital, meaning present at birth, or acquired later in life due to disease, injury, or age. But perhaps the most important thing to know about blindness is this: it's not the end of experience. People who are blind navigate the world using other senses, technology, and incredible adaptability. Many develop a highly tuned sense of hearing or touch, or use echolocation, clicking their tongues and listening to the sound bounce off nearby surfaces to map their surroundings. It might sound like science fiction, but it's very real and remarkably effective. Technology has also opened new doors. Screen readers translate visual text into speech. Braille displays allow for tactile reading. There are even experimental bionic eyes and retinal implants being developed to restore partial vision or provide sensory feedback. For those with some residual vision, tools like high-contrast screens, magnifying devices, or guide apps on smartphones can make a huge difference. And of course, guide dogs remain some of the most iconic and beloved companions for people with visual impairments, offering not just mobility assistance, but companionship and emotional support. It's also worth noting that losing sight doesn't mean losing the ability to visualize. Many blind individuals, especially those who had vision earlier in life, still experience vivid mental imagery. They can picture places, faces, even colors. The brain continues to imagine, even when the eyes no longer provide input. This adaptability speaks to the brain's incredible plasticity. When one sense is diminished, others often become more acute. The visual cortex itself may even begin to process other types of input, like touch or sound, helping to compensate for the loss. It's not a perfect replacement, but it's a powerful testament to how adaptable we truly are. Ultimately, while the eye is an amazing organ, it's not invincible. It can cloud, tear, misfocus, or falter. But with regular care, protective habits, and early detection, many issues can be managed or even prevented. So remember to rest your eyes when you've been staring at a screen. Eat your leafy greens. Wear sunglasses when it's bright. And don't skip your regular eye exams. The earlier a problem is caught, the better the chances of preserving that precious, complex gift of sight. And now, as your own eyes grow heavy and the world fades into gentle blur, let them rest. They've worked hard today, blinking, adjusting, focusing, interpreting. They deserve a break, and so do you. Imagine seeing the world through a completely different lens, literally. Imagine if instead of the colours you know, you saw in ultraviolet or infrared. If movement appeared in bursts of flashing light, or if the world around you shimmered with patterns that no human eye could detect. For many animals, this is not a science fiction fantasy. It's everyday reality. While humans tend to assume our way of seeing is the standard, the truth is, our visual system is just one version among many. Evolution has sculpted vision in countless ways, adapting eyes to environments, behaviours, and survival strategies across the entire animal kingdom, and some of these adaptations are downright extraordinary. Let's start with a few animals that have taken vision to dazzling extremes. The mantis shrimp, often hailed as the superhero of the animal vision world, has long fascinated scientists. It lives in shallow tropical waters and looks a bit like a Technicolor lobster. What makes it special, though, isn't just its punch, which by the way is strong enough to crack aquarium glass, but its eyes. Humans have 3 types of cone cells to detect colour, roughly tuned to red, green and blue. The mantis shrimp, it has up to 16. Some of these cones can detect ultraviolet light, while others sense polarized light, something we humans can only perceive with special lenses. It doesn't just see more colours than we do, it sees types of light we can't even conceptualize, and it processes colour in a way that is still not fully understood. Scientists once thought more cones meant more precise colour discrimination, but the mantis shrimp may actually process colours in a kind of shortcut style, trading complexity for speed. From the vibrant reefs, let's move to the air. Birds, particularly those that fly by day, have excellent vision. Their eyes are among the largest relative to body size in the animal world, and they're packed with cone cells. Many birds have tetrachromatic vision, meaning 4 types of cones, not just 3. That 4th cone gives them access to the ultraviolet spectrum. As a result, the world of a bird is painted in colours we can't even imagine. To us, many birds look nearly identical, but under ultraviolet light their feathers reveal hidden patterns and markings. What looks like a plain blue tit to us may look like a high-fashion runway model to another bird. These patterns often help in mate selection, territory signalling, and identification. Some flowers even have ultraviolet markings, like glowing runway lights guiding bees to their nectar. That's right. Insects like bees also see ultraviolet. They don't perceive red the way we do, but they more than make up for it with their ability to detect ultraviolet cues. Many flowers have evolved to be highly visible in the bee's spectrum, complete with patterns invisible to human eyes. To a bee, the world isn't just colourful, it's purposefully so, with visual instructions built right into the petals. Then there are animals that use their vision not for colour, but for light intensity, motion detection, or night vision. Take cats, for example. Their eyes have a higher number of rod cells, which are sensitive to low light. That's why your cat can zip around the room at night, with a grace you could never match. They also have a structure called the tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer behind the retina that bounces light back through the eye, giving it a second chance to be detected. It's what makes their eyes glow eerily in the dark and what gives them their remarkable night vision. Owls take this concept to an extreme. Their enormous eyes are adapted specifically for hunting in the dark. Each eye is so large that it can't rotate in the socket like ours do. Instead, the owl compensates with an incredibly flexible neck, capable of rotating around 270 degrees. Their visual sensitivity allows them to detect even the faintest rustle of a mouse in near total darkness. Snakes, on the other hand, have evolved a very different kind of sight, infrared vision. Pit vipers, pythons, and some boas have specialized organs called pit organs, which allow them to detect the infrared radiation given off by warm-blooded animals. These sensors aren't exactly eyes, but the brain processes the input visually, overlaying it with their normal vision. In essence, snakes see in heat maps. To them, a mouse glowing softly in the dark is like a neon sign flashing dinner. Bats, often thought to be blind, actually have pretty decent eyesight, especially in low light, but they're better known for their echolocation, a system that uses sound to navigate. They emit high-pitched squeaks and listen for the echoes that bounce back. This sound-based vision is incredibly precise, allowing them to detect tiny insects in mid-air. So while not technically vision, echolocation serves a very similar purpose, and it's another reminder that seeing doesn't always mean using eyes. Some creatures push the concept of sight to bizarre and beautiful limits. Consider the chameleon, which can move its eyes independently of each other. One eye can track a bug on the left while the other scans the right for threats. They have a full 360-degree view of their surroundings without moving their heads. When it's time to strike, both eyes converge to provide depth perception and outshoots the tongue, faster than the eye can see, pun intended. Or think about the horseshoe crab, an ancient creature with 10 eyes. That's right, 10. Some are on top of its shell, some are near its mouth, and others are spread out for different purposes. Its vision isn't sharp in the way ours is, but it's highly sensitive to changes in light and movement, which is all it needs to navigate its shallow, murky habitats. Even within our own species, vision can vary. Some people are tetrachromats, usually women, who have a fourth type of cone cell. This condition allows them to see subtle differences in colour that the rest of us miss entirely. A standard colour gradient might look smooth to most people, but to a tetrachromat it's bursting with variation. It's like having a secret superpower that no one else knows you have. And then there are those of us with colour blindness, which, while sometimes seen as a limitation, also provides a different way of experiencing the world. Some research even suggests that colourblind individuals can detect camouflage better than those with typical vision. In nature, there's rarely just one best way to see, only what works best in a given environment. So what does all of this tell us? It tells us that vision is not a universal experience. It is deeply shaped by biology, environment, and purpose. While we might marvel at the clarity and richness of our own sight, it's only one of many possible interpretations of the visual world. For some creatures, vision is about precision, seeing in perfect focus, tracking fast-moving prey. For others, it's about sensitivity, detecting the faintest hint of motion in the dark. Some see the world in ultraviolet, others in infrared. Some rely on sound, and some rely on heat. evolution has crafted countless ways of perceiving light and shadow, each tailored to a specific need, habitat, or lifestyle. And perhaps that's the most humbling lesson here. The world around us, what we call reality, is far richer, deeper, and more varied than we can perceive. Our eyes give us access to only a sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, and even within that narrow band, our perception is filtered by our biology and brain. But still, within that sliver we find beauty. We watch sunsets, recognize faces, appreciate art, read books, and catch the flicker of starlight. We use our vision to explore, create, and understand, and even if we can't see the ultraviolet glow of a flower or the heat signature of a mouse in the dark, we can imagine it. We can study it, simulate it, and dream about it. And now, as your own eyes begin to rest and the room fades into quiet darkness, remember that your sight, so familiar, so human, is just one version of a universal story. One way of looking at a world filled with countless ways of being seen. For most of human history, our eyes were our only tools for seeing. If something was too small, too distant, or too dim, it simply remained invisible, beyond the reach of our natural vision. But human beings, ever curious and relentlessly inventive, have never been content with the limits of biology. We've spent centuries finding ways to extend and enhance our sight, building machines to peer into the microcosmos and the stars, to correct what our eyes can't do on their own, and even to restore vision when it's been lost. Let's start with something familiar: glasses. Eyeglasses have been helping people see clearly for over 700 years. The earliest known visual aids were reading stones, simple glass spheres placed on a page to magnify the text beneath. These date back to the 9th century, possibly even earlier. They weren't exactly stylish, and they definitely didn't have thin titanium frames, but they worked. By the 13th century, the first wearable eyeglasses began to appear in Europe. These early spectacles were crude, two convex lenses framed in wood or leather, often held in place by hand or perched precariously on the nose. They were mainly used to correct presbyopia, the age-related difficulty in seeing things up close. Over the centuries, glasses evolved from a niche tool into a global necessity. Today, over 4 billion people rely on them. That's more than half of the world's population. Whether it's nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism, or presbyopia, lenses can bend light in exactly the right way to refocus it onto the retina, restoring clear vision. And then there are contact lenses, those tiny transparent discs that sit directly on the eye. They were first imagined in the late 19th century, but modern soft lenses didn't become widely available until the 1970s. For many, contacts offer a more convenient or cosmetically preferable alternative to glasses. Some are even tinted to enhance or change eye colour, a reminder that sight and appearance are often intertwined in subtle ways. But what if you don't want glasses or contacts? That's where refractive surgery comes in, with procedures like LASIK, short for laser-assisted in situ keratomyolusis. It sounds like something from a sci-fi novel, but LASIK is now a common outpatient procedure that reshapes the cornea with a precision laser, allowing light to be focused more accurately. It takes about 15 minutes, and many people see better immediately afterward. Of course it's not for everyone, but for millions it's been life-changing, and we're only just getting started. The real frontier of artificial sight lies in the world of bionics and neurotechnology, where biology meets machines. In recent decades, scientists and engineers have developed devices that aim not just to correct vision, but to restore it where it's been lost entirely. One of the most exciting developments in this field is the retinal implant. Think of it as a kind of bionic eye, a tiny array of electrodes surgically implanted into the retina. These implants receive visual information from an external camera, often mounted on a pair of glasses, and convert it into electrical signals that stimulate the retina's remaining cells. The result isn't full vision, but it can restore basic light perception, shapes, and movement. Devices like the Argus 2 system were among the first to reach clinical use. While they don't bring back the clarity of natural vision, they've allowed some individuals with severe retinal disease to navigate spaces, recognize large objects, and even perceive outlines of people. For someone who has lived in darkness, even these limited perceptions can be extraordinary. Another approach focuses not on the retina, but on the optic nerve, or even directly on the visual cortex in the brain. These are far more invasive, but they offer hope to those whose eyes or optic nerves are too damaged for retinal implants to work. One experimental device, for example, uses a grid of tiny electrodes placed on the surface of the brain to stimulate the visual cortex, bypassing the eyes entirely. Again, the resulting vision is basic, flashes of light called phosphonies, but researchers are working toward more detailed visual experiences. And while we're on the topic of seeing the unseen, let's talk about microscopes. Before the invention of the microscope, the world was divided into two parts, the visible and the invisible. But in the 17th century, pioneers like Antony van Leeuwenhoek and Robert Hooke changed that forever. They peered into water droplets and slices of cork, revealing a universe of tiny creatures and structures that no one had ever imagined. Cells, bacteria, blood vessels, all invisible to the naked eye, suddenly came into view. Today, microscopes can resolve structures at the level of molecules and atoms. Electron microscopes don't use light at all, but rather beams of electrons, which have much shorter wavelengths and can produce images at astonishing resolutions. Thanks to these tools, we've seen viruses, nanostructures, and the very building blocks of life itself. Then, turning our gaze outward, we have telescopes, humanity's greatest tool for expanding vision beyond the Earth. Galileo's early telescope in the 1600s revealed moons orbiting Jupiter, shattering the idea that everything revolved around the Earth. Since then, our telescopic eyes have grown ever more powerful. The Hubble Space Telescope, launched in 1990, showed us galaxies billions of light years away. And now, the James Webb Space Telescope is peering even further, capturing ancient light from the early universe. These instruments don't just magnify, they translate invisible wavelengths into visible ones. Infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, telescopes can detect them all and render them into images we can see. They let us visualize things far outside the range of human vision, expanding our understanding of space, time, and existence itself. And closer to home, we use visual technology in countless ways every day. Cameras, once rare and expensive, are now in nearly every pocket. They allow us to capture and share moments, observe wildlife, inspect machine parts, and explore art. Thermal imaging lets firefighters see through smoke. Night vision helps soldiers navigate in darkness. Medical imaging, including technologies like MRI, CT scans, and ultrasounds, lets doctors look inside the body without a single incision. And let's not forget augmented reality, the blending of digital information with the real world. Apps and devices that overlay arrows on sidewalks, translate signs instantly, or even simulate how furniture would look in your living room. The line between sight and data is beginning to blur, creating a new kind of vision, one layered with information, customizable and interactive. As technology advances, we may find ourselves with superhuman sight, glasses that zoom, lenses that adjust instantly to changing light, or implants that let us see in infrared. It's not just science fiction anymore. Some of these ideas are already in development. But with all this enhancement, it's worth pausing to appreciate the basics. The natural human eye, with its cornea, lens, and retina, is still an astonishing feat of biology. Billions of neurons and photoreceptors working together in perfect harmony, interpreting light with elegance and speed. Our attempts to replicate or enhance it, while impressive, are still catching up to what nature created through millions of years of evolution. So whether you're wearing glasses, trying out virtual reality goggles, or simply watching the stars, remember, your sight, augmented or not, is part of an ancient legacy. One that has always driven us to see more, to see better, and to see what lies just beyond the horizon. And now, as your eyes begin to soften and the room fades to shadow, know that technology may one day light the dark again. But for now, it's time to close your eyes and rest. Let the world dim gently around you. You've seen enough for one day. Think about the last piece of art that moved you. Maybe it was a painting, its colours swirling together like a quiet storm, or a film scene that stayed in your mind long after the credits rolled. Maybe it was the play of shadows in a photograph, or the way sunlight filtered through stained glass in an old building. Chances are, whatever it was, your eyes were the entry point. Sight is not just a biological tool, it's also a bridge to culture, beauty, and meaning. Let's begin with art, the most obvious companion to vision. Since the dawn of humanity, people have been making marks, on cave walls, in the sand, on papyrus, parchment, and canvas. Some of the oldest surviving images found in caves in Spain and Indonesia are over 40,000 years old. These early artworks weren't just decorative, they were a form of communication, a way of seeing the world and showing others how you saw it. And that's really what art is. Whether it's a painting, a sculpture, or a digital design, it's someone else's way of saying, "This is how it looks to me." The human eye becomes the first audience. Even abstract art, which often resists easy interpretation, relies on visual engagement. Colour, form, line, contrast. Our brains respond to these elements instinctively. We're wired to find patterns, to seek out symmetry, to recognise faces in just a few dots and curves. Art works with these impulses. Sometimes it soothes them, sometimes it challenges them. Consider colour theory, an entire field devoted to understanding how different colours interact and how they affect our perception. Red tends to feel urgent or passionate. Blue is calm and cool. Yellow often reads as cheerful or attention-grabbing. These associations aren't just random, they're deeply rooted in both biology and culture. Artists have used these responses for centuries to guide emotion, create tension, or evoke serenity. Then there's perspective, a technique that revolutionized Western art during the Renaissance. Before that, paintings were often flat and symbolic. But when artists like Filippo Brunelleschi and Leonardo da Vinci began experimenting with vanishing points and converging lines, they created a sense of depth that mimicked real sight. Suddenly, a painting could draw you in, make you feel like you were looking through a window into another world. It was a profound shift, one that changed not just how people painted, but how they saw. Of course, vision isn't just about fine art, it plays a central role in science too. Think of Galileo peering through his telescope and discovering that the moon has craters, that Jupiter has moons, and that Venus has phases. Or think of the microscope, revealing entire worlds in a drop of pond water. In science, seeing has often meant knowing. Diagrams, graphs, and visual models are essential tools in almost every scientific field. Complex data becomes understandable when it's transformed into something we can see. A colourful heat map, a detailed anatomical drawing, the double helix of DNA, first visualised through X-ray diffraction. These images don't just decorate scientific papers, they communicate the core ideas. Even mathematical concepts, which might seem purely abstract, are often visualized to aid understanding. Think of fractals, spirals, and geometric proofs. A well-drawn diagram can make a problem suddenly click. Visualization turns the invisible into something we can grasp. In medicine, vision plays a life-saving role. Doctors rely on imaging tools like MRIs, CT scans, and X-rays to diagnose disease. Surgeons watch monitors during procedures. Radiologists interpret shadows and densities in black and white scans. In many cases, a trained eye can see things the patient cannot even feel. The phrase, "we caught it early," often means we saw it early. Architecture, too, is a deeply visual field. Buildings are designed to be lived in, yes, but also looked at. The shape of a window, the curve of a roof, the way light moves through a room at different times of day. Architects think about how a space feels visually, as much as how it functions. The best buildings don't just stand up, they speak to the eyes. Even fashion, which we sometimes dismiss as superficial, is an expression of visual culture. Clothing communicates mood, status, identity. A sharp suit, a flowing dress, bright colours, muted tones, textures, patterns. These choices all play into how we see ourselves and how we want to be seen by others. And of course we can't forget the moving image. Cinema, television, and video games are entire industries built around vision. Directors and cinematographers think in shots and angles, light and shadow. They guide your eyes across the screen, focusing your attention, shaping your emotional response. A close-up tells you what to feel. A wide shot tells you where you are. The visual language of film is so effective that we often absorb it without even realizing how much it's shaping our experience. And let's not overlook the rise of digital media. Social media platforms, video sharing apps, streaming services, all of them rely on visual content. Images, clips, animations, infographics, emojis. The modern world is a feast for the eyes. In fact, much of our communication now happens visually, with fewer and fewer words. We send pictures, reaction GIFs, memes. We share experiences not just by telling, but by showing. This visual saturation has changed how we process information. Studies show that people remember visuals far better than text. This is known as the picture superiority effect. When you read a sentence, you may remember part of it, but if you see a picture of the same concept, you're more likely to retain it. This is why visuals are so powerful in advertising, education, and storytelling. They stick. Of course, sight isn't always celebrated. In some cases, our visual biases can mislead us. We judge books by their covers, quite literally. We often make snap decisions about people based on appearance, and visual culture can promote unrealistic standards of beauty or perfection. Filters, photo editing, carefully curated social media profiles, they can create illusions that affect how we see ourselves and others. This is the shadow side of a world that places so much importance on the visual. Still, vision remains a powerful tool for connection. Think of eye contact. It can communicate trust, affection, anger, or interest, all without a single word. A glance across a crowded room, a raised eyebrow, a knowing smile. These subtle cues form a rich and often unspoken language. For many people, especially those who struggle with words, visual communication is more intuitive and honest than speech. Even people who are blind or have low vision engage with visual culture through description, tactile art, or technologies that translate images into sound. Museums now offer audio guides and raised line drawings. Films are increasingly accompanied by visual description tracks. The goal is not just inclusion, but access to the richness that vision can bring, however it is experienced. And ultimately, that's what sight offers us. Not just clarity or detail, but meaning. A way to connect with ideas, people, and the world around us. So whether you're watching the sun set over the ocean, studying a painting in a museum, or simply noticing how the morning light falls across your bedroom floor, you're participating in something uniquely human. The transformation of light into understanding, sensation into significance. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and the visual noise of the day begins to fade, let them rest. Let the colours, the patterns, the moments all settle softly into memory. The world will still be here when you wake, waiting to be seen again. Close your eyes for a moment. The world doesn't disappear, it simply changes. You can still hear the sounds around you, feel the air on your skin, notice the pressure of the mattress beneath you. The absence of sight doesn't erase your experience, it just shifts it. And for millions of people around the world, that shift is not temporary. For those who are blind or have low vision, life is navigated through a different sensory lens. One not lesser, but different. Adapted, tuned in to the parts of the world most people never notice. Let's begin with a simple but often misunderstood idea. Being blind is not always the same as seeing nothing at all. Some people are born blind and have no visual memory. Others lose their vision later in life and retain visual impressions, mental images, and even dreams that include sight. Some have light perception, able to tell the difference between day and night, or where a light source is. Others might have tunnel vision, or blurred shapes, or complete darkness. Vision loss exists on a wide spectrum, and no two people experience it in exactly the same way. But here's the remarkable part. The human brain is incredibly adaptable. When vision is reduced or gone, other senses often become more finely tuned, not in a magical superhero way, but in a practical neurological way. The brain learns to rely more heavily on touch, hearing, smell, and spatial memory. In fact, studies using brain imaging have shown that in blind individuals, the visual cortex, the part of the brain typically used to process sight, doesn't just go quiet. It often gets repurposed. It starts responding to sound, touch, even spoken language. It's like the brain looks at this unused space and thinks, well, we've got this room, let's turn it into something useful. This process is part of what's called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself based on experience, and it's one of the reasons why many people who are blind lead full, rich, and highly independent lives. Not because they've magically compensated for the loss of sight, but because they've adapted, and because the world is slowly getting better at adapting with them. Technology plays a huge role in that. From screen readers that translate text into spoken words, to braille displays that convert digital text into raised dots on a tactile surface, people with vision loss have access to more tools than ever before. Smartphones with voice assistants and built-in accessibility features have become powerful aids. There are apps that can identify colours, read out printed text, describe surroundings, and even recognize faces. What once required specialised equipment can now fit in the palm of a hand. And then there's orientation and mobility training, a set of skills taught to help people navigate the world safely and confidently. This includes using a white cane, which may seem like a simple stick, but is actually a sophisticated tool. The cane detects obstacles, changes in terrain, and helps build a mental map of the environment. It's both a physical extension and a symbol, a quiet signal to others that says, "I'm here, I'm capable, and I see differently." For many, the guide dog is another essential partner. These specially trained dogs don't lead their handlers like a GPS would. Instead, they respond to commands, help avoid obstacles, and even disobey instructions if doing so would lead to danger, a behaviour called intelligent disobedience. The bond between a person and their guide dog is deep and mutual. It's not just about navigation, it's about trust. But perhaps what's most important to understand is that vision is not the only way to know the world. People who are blind often develop extraordinary spatial awareness, not by seeing space, but by hearing it, feeling it, remembering it. Some even use a form of echolocation, producing tongue clicks or tapping a cane and listening for how the sound bounces off walls and objects. It's a skill also found in certain animals, bats, dolphins, whales, but humans can learn it too. And some have become so proficient they can ride bikes, hike trails, and navigate city streets using sound alone. Touch, too, becomes a primary mode of information. Braille, invented in the 19th century by Louis Braille, is not a language. It's a code, a way of representing existing languages in tactile form. Each character is made up of a pattern of 6 raised dots, and skilled readers can move their fingers across a line of Braille at impressive speeds. Braille is found on elevator buttons, restroom signs, medication packaging, and more. It's literacy through fingertips. Sound also plays a powerful role in emotional connection. Without visual cues, people become more attuned to tone of voice, inflection, and rhythm in speech. A friend's happiness, fatigue, sarcasm, or hesitation can be heard with subtlety. Listening becomes more active. Conversation becomes more focused. In a world where eye contact often does the heavy lifting in communication, people who are blind rely on the music of language. And yes, people who are blind dream. Those who are born with vision often retain visual elements in their dreams: faces, colours, places. Those born without sight tend to dream through other senses: hearing, touch, smell, emotion. Their dreams are no less vivid or complex, they are simply built from different raw materials. Just like in waking life, the brain adapts, invents, and constructs reality in the absence of vision. So what is it like to live without sight? Well, it's like asking what it's like to live without flight. For birds, flying is normal. For us, it's not. That doesn't mean our lives are incomplete. It just means we live them differently. The same is true for vision. People who are blind don't experience life as a series of absences. They experience life as it is, with all its richness, challenges, and beauty. In fact, blindness can offer a unique perspective, one less influenced by appearances and more focused on essence. People often speak of the way it sharpens listening, deepens relationships, encourages mindfulness. Of course, it also comes with barriers, some physical, some social, some attitudinal. But many of these barriers come not from blindness itself, but from a world that assumes sight is the default, and everything else is a deviation. That's beginning to change. Advocacy, education, and accessible design are helping create a world where all ways of seeing are respected. More museums are offering tactile exhibits. More public spaces are including audio signage and braille maps. More designers are thinking about colour contrast, font size, and screen readers when they create digital content. And perhaps most beautifully, more stories are being told by people who experience the world without sight. Authors, musicians, scientists, athletes, teachers, reminding us that blindness is not a defect, but a difference. Not the absence of light, but the presence of other ways of knowing. So tonight, as your own eyes close and the world grows dim, consider this. Your experience of the world is shaped by how you see it, but not only by how you see it. You're also shaped by what you hear, touch, smell, remember, and imagine. Vision is one thread in a much larger tapestry. And as the darkness settles around you, know that for some, this is not the end of seeing. It's just the beginning of something else, something quiet, something profound, something real. And so, we've reached the end of our gentle exploration of photons and perception, of biology and beauty, of all the intricate ways that sight shapes the human experience. It's strange, isn't it, that something as simple as light bouncing off objects passing through the eye and landing on a patch of tissue in the back of the brain can create an entire visual world. Trees and faces, paintings and shadows, smiles and stars, all filtered through the lens of sight. But along the way, we've also discovered that vision isn't just about eyes. It's a partnership between biology and interpretation, between sensation and understanding. And we've learned that while sight might be our most celebrated sense, it doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a larger sensory symphony, each sense playing its own quiet part in how we know the world. So let me ask you again, just as I did at the beginning of our time together, where are you listening from tonight? What time is it there? Have you found a cozy corner of the world to wind down? Are you beneath a blanket, the glow of the screen dimmed, your eyes growing heavy? And perhaps more importantly, do you still feel that sight is your most valued sense? Maybe it is. Maybe it always will be. Or maybe, just maybe, you've begun to see how vision is just one way of perceiving the world. Wondrous, yes, but not the only window to wonder. If this journey helped you unwind, or made you think, or kept you company while the world slowed down around you, I'd be truly grateful if you gave the video a like, or subscribe to join me again for future explorations. It helps this sleepy little channel grow, and it lets me keep bringing you more calm corners of curiosity. Now, let your eyes close fully, let your breath deepen. The day has offered enough to see, and tomorrow, the world will still be there, quietly waiting for you to open your eyes once more.